Tuesday, 3rd of March 26, and I'm just looking at the Yougov weekly voting poll for the UK, and we've got Reform here in 23% now, Greens in 21. So just to show you how I've got this here, they do a weekly poll. So this is the second one down there is the February one, say a week ago or whatever, and then the one below that is from last summer. I asked it, and these are all Yougov's weekly polls. So Reform went from 29% last summer to 24% now, last week, and now they're down to 23. And the Greens have went from 11% last summer to last week 17%, and now they're 21. And personally, I think Yougov, I find them a sort of conservative. I don't mean Conservative Party, I mean conservative in how they come up with their polls, because they've always had the Greens lower and Reform not so high as others. I think that was their peak, 29% Reform with Yougov, whereas others have had Reform at 35%, which I believe to be correct. I mean, I go by Find Out Now polling company. I think a lot of people see them as outliers, I think, because they use a different methodology or whatever, and Yougov are meant to be sort of the respected ones, even though I think they all got the last election wrong and the one before, probably, you know. It doesn't matter. If you're a polling company, it doesn't really matter if you get things wrong. It's a bit like being a politician and that, or a football pundit and that. It doesn't matter if you get things wrong, as long as you get an air of gravitas or whatever, you know. And I'm looking at this from a point of view. I don't believe in political parties. I believe on this, like the Swiss electoral system, where they constantly have referendums. They're having 8 this month. I think they're having another 8 in June. They happen quarterly. The one in June, they've got one in immigration coming up. And they do have political parties, but yeah, I prefer that totally. It's closer to direct democracy. So, personally, the only thing I vote for now is on immigration, what I regard as whoever's the most common sense on it. None are really fully common sense on it yet. I mean, now I would vote Restore Britain, then after that Advance UK, then after that Reform, and I couldn't really vote for anyone else, maybe Social Democrat Party, and ironically, George Galloway's Workers' Party are quite good on immigration. I don't think his core vote realises what his policies are on that. But I'd be going for Restore Britain now, who've only just came about like 3 weeks ago. And I'm wondering if this is why Reform are going down. So I only vote on immigration, like that's 98% of my vote. Other things I believe in, like basic income in general. I mean, Elon Musk says that soon we're going to have basic high income because money's not going to matter anymore, because all things are going to cost raw materials, because it's all going to be automated and artificial intelligence. Everybody's going to be out of a job, you know. That's not the same as far left policies on economics, you know. But you end up in an even better position, you know, with Musk, who isn't even left. I mean, you could say most would probably regard him, well, the left would regard him probably as far right or something, you know, but he's saying we're going to have basic high income, and we're not going to have to do any employment or anything, mostly, almost, that sort of thing, which sounds like a far left utopia, but I mean, they're talking about something else completely entirely. They're still in old-fashioned mode as well, you know, even though they all use mobile phones, etc. But yeah, so this is the sort of situation we're in, I think, and I think we should look to the patriotic millionaires in terms of tax, which I would call the Infrastructure and Social Cohesion Fund. I mean, that's the name I've come up with now. I would gladly welcome better names than that, you know, because like the Conservatives and Labour changed all the names for benefits, you know, they changed unemployment benefit to job seekers allowance, whereas nobody changed the word tax, you know, and tax is a harsh word, and people think of it as taking something away, you know. They don't think of it as like a golf club. If you pay a bit, you'll get this service. If you pay a bit more, you'll get an even better service. They're not thinking in that way. They're thinking, I resent this. The word tax isn't nice. It's the government taking my money. I resent it. You know, I mean, I'm not just saying that I'm high tax or anything, I mean, I've no doubt that governments spend it ridiculously, you know, it's really wasteful, including in the public sector and all that. So, both the right and the left don't like me really, you know, so, yeah, I'm just looking at this. So at the moment, with this, I want reform to do well. I'm not surprised that, well, like I say, apart from immigration, I would be interested in the Greens. In general, I've voted Greens before, like, I don't know, 25 years ago or something. I always wondered, why aren't socialists and that, why are they sticking with Labour? Why haven't they went to the Greens? And now it seems like finally they are, you know, although your party's just came about. So, I mean, the two missing from this are your party and Restore Britain, who I think are going to be two massive parties. And like I say, I don't believe in first past the post. It's the worst type of democracy. It's the most undemocratic type of democracy, which Keir Starmer greatly wants to keep. You know, him being radical is giving 16 and 17-year-olds a vote in the first past the post, where you get to vote every 5 years. You know, at least in Australia you get to vote every 3 years, you know. But, so, no matter what type of election you've got, it should be every 3 years. Wales have brought down their Senate from 5 years to 4 years. They put it up because David Cameron, you know, he changed it so you could have an election at any time. So for some reason they changed it to 5 years to avoid an election or something, which was meant to be every 4 years. I'm talking about David Cameron, they were expecting every 4 years. And Scotland done the same. Wales went back to 4 years and they're going to be proportional representation this May. Scotland have stuck with 5 years and we are staying with the two system. So Wales have went totally democratic in my opinion, or more democratic, and Scotland haven't. And of course in Britain we've got the most undemocratic type of all. I mean, our system first past the post, the only countries who would be out the European Court of Human Rights if they left would be Britain, Russia and Belarus. Any Labour MP will tell you that. Whereas at the first past the post system, the only countries that use that in Europe are Britain and Belarus. Russia don't even use it, you know, so even though Putin gets 99% of the vote, you know, but yeah, so that's just to show you the state where we're not in a very democratic place. But this is interesting. This seems to be the big switch, and I've been waiting for this. And we had the Gorton by-election last week, so maybe this has been when the big switch has happened. And what I'm interested in is how ethnic quote minorities are voting, you know, because it's always seemed to me that maybe if people are interested in open borders and benefits, then the Greens are the best by far. But maybe people were thinking, well, Labour, there's been a lot of chain migration that way, it's not really hampered it too much, so Labour's been alright. Tories been a bit of a concern, but Boris Wave and things like that was okay. I mean, I would imagine anyone coming off a dinghy in Dover would want to say to the British people, don't vote reform, even though they're still not that hard on immigration. Don't vote reform. Any of the other parties, main parties, is fine. You know, but even they're not saying, I mean, if I came off a dinghy, I would be saying vote Green, you know, because they're basically open borders and benefits. Labour are seen that way, but finally it looks as if they're not, and maybe it's just to do with Gaza in general. But I mean, to me, ethnic quote minorities, I don't know, make up 30% of the population. I think most people voting, or most Brits who have family back from 1947 or whatever, most of those Brits still think we're a country and we have to be nice to a group who are very small. Nice to newcomers who are a very small group, and they're not going to want things like FGM. They're not going to want that, an MP, to be in favour of that. In fact, on the citizenship test, I think you get a question where you have to reject FGM totally. But I've checked Gemini and it says that 100% Somalian women have FGM. So every Somalian that's come to Britain expecting the government to make them a citizen and are correct, that does happen. The government do that on their behalf. All the women that have come have had FGM, and the men oversaw it probably. And then they put in that citizenship test. We totally reject FGM, So possibly they have totally rejected it now, and they'll never vote for an MP who supports that in any way. I'm guessing there's been a lot of change on British values because the women's rights groups now see the burqa as one way the British women express themselves. I think Humza Yousaf said from the burqa to bikini, that's British values, and I think female MPs will agree with that. But I think FGM might be a line for most women MPs, although they might be convinced, I don't know, but I'm thinking that that's maybe a line too far for them. But anyway, on to that, and they're saying they don't think that's British values, but if Brits want it, how is it not? Are you not being a bit thingy against a group that want it if you're because we're all British, I mean, it's a bit like Yousaf said last week that once Reform become the ruling party, former churches won't be able to be converted into mosques. I mean, my question is, why not? If Brits want that, why not? I think that's a bit discriminatory. Maybe the way he's thinking it thinks it's too much of a symbolic view, and it's going to affect the way Brits vote. The Brits might not like it symbolically. It's a bit like Robert Burns was about to go to Jamaica, but then that week his Kilmarnock poems were published, so he never went to Jamaica. I mean, symbolic to me, it does. I mean, I'm not in favour of statue toppling anyway, but I would imagine if people are interested in toppling statues, then he must be top. But maybe they're thinking, how will that affect SNP voters? But anyway, Reform are doing really well in Scotland now, so I think SNP voters are getting the message finally. But anyway, back onto this. So personally, I'm wondering if the Reform vote's gone down because of Restore Britain and also Advance UK, but I think they're just going to crumble now, really, because most of them will probably go over to Restore Britain. They're members, because Advance is looking a bit, I don't know, thingy at the moment. So to me, I'm just looking for a protest vote on immigration. So I'm going for Restore Britain. If somebody comes along that's even more sensible, I would vote for them, And even though a lot of my things I'd vote in a referendum, probably the Greens would vote for as well. There's no way I could vote for them now, but I'm glad it's Reform versus Green, rather than Labour. I want Labour just to vanish, really, because they're just a sham, really. And Keir Starmer's the worst Prime Minister ever, and the only dislikable one ever that I can remember, in my opinion. He's authoritarian. As Anna Sarwar says, he's made too many mistakes. But I mean, he made too many mistakes before he was obviously not a good candidate at any time. You know, Zach Polanski keeps talking about how when he was in the Lib Dems, he was in a debate with Keir Starmer in 2015 election in Islington, and the crowd booed Keir Starmer, and they weren't happy with Keir Starmer's replies, you know. And this is a Labour crowd, probably, you know. So, yeah. So I'm just looking, and there's the Greens. They went from 11% last summer to 17, and now to 21. And like I say, I felt that leftists should have been voting Greens decades ago. So why it's taking so long, I don't really know. It shows you how hard it is to shift people. I can't think of them as one grouping, you know. I can think of one group that might be concerned about Gaza and either get the message out, because the website, the Muslim Vote, in the UK told Muslims there to vote for the Greens. So I would guess they would, in Gorton, they would have preferred to vote for an independent or the Workers' Party as a transient party. I think the Workers' Party will just disappear. You know, they'll go for independence when they can. I mean, the Workers' Party was meant to win Blackburn, but an independent decided he was going to stand during the election, and he won it from the Workers' Party, who were supposed to. That's who was supposed to represent whoever votes for them. Yeah, so I think that's the way the Workers' Party will go in all these concentrated areas. So looking at this, so Greens, they've got this block. I mean, I'm not being funny here, but it's like where women can have, I'll put it another way, where men can have babies and the burqa, and I could put it even more extreme, but that seems to be the two messages, spectrums of the Greens. I mean, the Greens who represent each side of that would disagree, I don't know, or would they? I don't know. But yeah, that's the two sort of things, messages the Greens are giving out. Men can have babies, and the burqa are both British values. So yeah, now they get the Greens from 11 to 17 to 21. So they only went up last week, sort of 4 points. So it must have been the Gorton by-election. So I don't know if this is a Muslim vote that suddenly said, maybe looked at them, maybe looked at the open border and benefits policies as well and compared it to Labour. But also there's we don't know if they see them just as a strategic vote, as a lesser evil, or whatever. This is the Greens I'm talking about, or if they like the Greens' policies overall. Yeah, so maybe that's where this new votes come from, I don't know, and maybe that's where Labour's votes vanished, I don't know. And the Tories, 16, 18, 17, I find them irrelevant, really. I don't even follow them. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, I think, is actually a good politician, really. I think she said about Nigeria that she doesn't regard herself, when she was in Nigeria till she was about 18, she didn't regard herself as Nigerian. She regarded herself as Yoruba, which is an ethnicity, and she didn't think of herself as connected to the Islam people of the north. You can look at it yourself, you know, but I'm surprised she's not been questioned by the police under the woke policies, plus Keir's Stasi police policies, you know. And then Keir himself said we're an island of strangers last year, so I'm surprised the police haven't questioned him as well, you know, under his own Stasi policy and plus the woke policies that we've been going on. Apparently Shabana Mahmood in January has given out an order. The police have to use their judgment now on these sort of tweets and stuff. They're not just to, if someone reports something, to investigate, to inquire about it. So Shabana Mahmood seems to have sort of cooled it down in England and Wales. Don't know how that is happening in effect. In Scotland, we're probably still with woke Stasi rules. You know, the woke are the Stasi groupings. Group. So, and Labour to me are irrelevant as well, and I just can't believe how their votes holding up. So, especially in Gorton last week, they get 25%, they were in third. The Greens get 40%. But to me, the shock is they get 25%. I mean, Reform get 28% in Gorton and Denton. So Reform were just ahead of Labour, and I just can't believe. For me, the shock is that Labour were so high there. I don't know who's voting for them at all. Like, I don't know if it's still 1947 Brits or if it's ethnic quote minority, maybe. I mean, the Greens did have a video in Urdu which had Keir Starmer shaking hands with Modi. We're to draw our own conclusions from that, especially if you don't speak Urdu, because you just need to guess what the message was from the Greens. But I would imagine Hindus like Modi. I mean, Modi's I think he's seen, maybe the far left in the West see him as a sort of ethno-nationalist, I don't know, but I'm guessing, I don't know, do Hindus in Britain like Modi? But anyway, for whatever reason, maybe, I think there's about 500 Hindus in Gorton and Denton, I don't know, but maybe they usually vote Tories, I think, but maybe they voted Labour this time. I don't know, actually. We've got to guess because nobody really tells us or whatever. It's just suddenly when polls go suddenly weird like this, and we've got to try and guess what's happening. Apparently this weekly poll, Yougov, they sample about 1,200 people, but they don't do an ethnic minority breakdown because they feel it's not enough, because there's so many ethnic minority groups, so they don't feel they would have enough samples, out of that, they would need to do their own. In fact, they done a tracker last year, just to give you an idea, and there's the Lib Dems. I don't know who's voting for them now. It seems to be the shires that vote for them, or places that traditionally don't want to say we don't vote Labour or Tory here, or they're the protest party when they don't want to vote Tory or Labour. A lot of places in the Highlands vote Lib Dem. I think it's to say we're not Labour, Tory or SNP here. Although a lot of them went SNP, but now they seem to be going back again. But yeah, but here's an ethnic minority poll from Yougov last October. Gemini says this was Yougov's last ethnic poll, so that would be like 1,500 people from these groupings, and they've put it down to black, Pakistani, Bangladeshi together, and then Indian, which I take to mean Hindu. I mean, it could mean Sikh. I mean, I don't think we should be viewing these things along nationality or even race. We should be maybe by ethnicity. I mean, race and ethnicity, but that's if they vote in blocks, basically, and then we've got mixed, and we've got white as well, so, which even white isn't right, because you've got native Brits and you've got European Brits or whatever, they're not the same, but so this is among blacks. I mean, they're all being lumped together, but Labour seemed to be the most popular party back last October anyway. This might have changed, but the Greens were pretty popular as well. Then the Lib Dems, then the Tories at 27 and Reform 21, so there's still quite a big vote for Reform there. But so that's Labour 51, Green 43. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, does it? Oh, this is one's favourability. So this is the parties they find favourable. So you could just asking each party. So yeah, and then amongst Pakistani and Bangladeshi Brits, we've got the Greens way ahead and 58 in favourability. Then the Lib Dems at 32, and then Labour at 31, Tories 13, Reform 7. So and then Indian, which I take to mean Hindu, but maybe it could be Hindu and Sikh. I don't know, but I don't know, maybe it even means Muslim Indian, because there's very many. But anyway, it's the Greens now. I think it used to be the Tories that were ahead, but I don't know. 47 for the Greens, favourability. Lib Dems 43, Tories 37, Labour 30, and Reform 14. Ironically, possibly with Labour, they're seen as the Muslim party or whatever, and Muslims have just rejected them in a way because of Gaza. So, I don't know if that's true, I'm just guessing. And then mixed, we've got Greens at 50 in favourability, Lib Dems 44, Labour 36, Tories 16, Reform 14. I mean, personally, that's the way I would. With Greens first, Lib Dem second, that's the way I would be viewing it for theirs. And I'm just looking at India in there, as you see, they've got the Tories at 37, so they've got the Tories in third, ahead of Labour. So that's how, I think that's a Hindu vote, but we don't actually know. Whereas all the other ones, I've got Tories quite low. I mean, Tory are 27 with Black, so that's quite high. And even 21 with Reform. But with the South Asian two, Reform are very low, and very low with one group, but not the other. And then we've got the white group, but that includes Europeans as well, that's not just native Brits. We've got Greens favourable at 39, then Lib Dems 37, Reform third, 37, so there's Reform there. Yeah, so that's from last October, all the same. They've not done one since, I don't think. I mean, I don't even know if this polling's correct, but, it's Gemini, it's making them up. But this is how Blacks' votes apparently have changed. Black Britain voters have voting has changed over the last few years. So I've got it 2022, so this is before Gaza. Wouldn't affect black vote, I don't think. The general election 2024 and last October, according to Yougov. Let's see, back then, Labour had... Is this actually their vote? No, it's not. It's just favourability, I think. I don't know if it is favourability, actually. I think it's mixing the two up. The two old polls are probably how they were going to vote, and the new one's favourability. I don't know. But anyway, Labour used to be really big with black vote, 68%, 72%. And with last October, the last time this was done for ethnic minorities, they were 51%. So who knows what they're at now, but they're still pretty big with the black vote. With the Greens, they were nowhere, 2022 general election, so 22, 10%. It's not actually telling me there. What's it? I think it is party favourability, as long as it's a Yougov poll. Same actually won, Doesn't say my source there. It's maybe Yougov. And there's how the Lib Dems went. So the Greens were nowhere, now they're very favourable. Lib Dems just went, for some reason they were quite popular back in 22. Well, relatively. Then they weren't, and now they're quite popular again, 35. The Tories went from 18, then 11, and now 27. And Reform went from 2 to 7, and now to 21 amongst black vote in terms of favourability. And maybe one of the things is Reform are perceived to be, how could I call it, strong in borders, and maybe the people coming, traditionally their areas are very socially conservative. May perhaps in their homeland they might vote a very right-wing government in terms of immigration over there. So that might be tapping into, and maybe they're looking at the way Britain's changing and they're thinking, this isn't what I came for, I had a vision of the British people in my mind, and this isn't it. No, we're not really allowed to think these things, but anyway. I mean, Shabana Mahmood at the Labour conference last year, she said something like, and even her own community are anxious about immigration now, talking mass migration. And I'm wondering, why would that be? I mean, would that be due to chain migration in our community? I don't think so. Would it be because the community mass migration, people are coming in from other groupings? Maybe that's what our community's thinking about. We don't really know. We can just guess, But anyway, and this is the favourability amongst British Indians. So the Greens in 22 were 11. Then it went general election, they were 15 favourable. Then and now 42% amongst Indians. I take that to mean Hindu, but I don't know, maybe Hindu, Sikh, and Muslim even, I don't know. Lib Dem went from 20 to 12 to 43 now, which is pretty good. Tories 42, so they were very favourable amongst British Indian voters. Then it went down to 36 at the general election, now 37, so they're still quite thingy. I think if immigration had stopped, say 20 years ago, the Tories might be very popular with Indians, but now they can vote in 2 ways. They can vote in 3 ways. They can vote just the way as if they were just British individuals voting for responsible British parties. I say quotes responsible in quotes, traditional responsible, like Tory, Labour. I mean, the idea was that you come to Britain and then you vote either Labour or Tory. That was the idea. But now they could vote possibly an independent who likes Modi a lot. We don't know. We don't know. They might make a video in Hindu that has Keir Starmer shaking hands with the Pakistani Prime Minister. That would be for a British election. We don't know. So they might vote an independent that way if they can in concentrated areas, or they might sort of jump backwards and forwards depending on how other groups are voting, etc. We don't know. We don't know how Leicester's going to go in terms of political parties and things, for example. And then Labour, with the British Indian voters, they were quite high in 22 at 55 in favourability, went to 45 and now they're at 30. Ironically, it might not just be about non-Gaza politics or who support Gaza. We don't know if that support is because they care about Palestinians or if it's just an ego proxy thing. I'm talking about, Hindus I don't think are too bothered about that unless individually they're bothered. Yeah, I don't know actually. But maybe they're voting the other way from the other group, that's what I'm meaning. So, and then Reform, they went from 3 to 8 to 14, and I kind of see that as a perceived Modi party in Britain, even though it's probably not as strong on like things Modi says on a certain subject. Reform soft, but maybe that's attractive to people, who would vote that way anywhere in the world, whether they lived in somewhere in a country whose language they can speak fluently, and maybe they have a flag of that country, and no matter where they are, they would vote for somewhere past the centre right, especially on one issue. So maybe that's attractive, in general, just the mindset. Or maybe they could have voted for Reform because of their policies and that, or whatever. I don't know. Perception policy, like. I've just asked Gemini what percent of voters are ethnic minority, and it's as of 2026, it's approximately 14 to 15% of the total UK electorate. Personally, I think that's probably a bit higher because, most of the ethnic minorities are probably very young, so maybe with under 18s, ethnic minority might be 40% of the thingy. I'll check it out. But of course, with voters, you've got all the ones in their 80s and 90s. They'll probably be, very few of them will be ethnic minority, whereas the ones that are in their 30s will be quite high. So probably it's an underestimate anyway. But this is maybe the total electorate at the moment. So they're saying white, and that can be European as well. So white might be 85%, but I think British is probably about 75%. 10% of that will be other white, maybe even more. So 75% native Brit, maybe Asian British. I don't know why they always call them all the Asians in, because they've even got the Chinese in there. I don't think they relate to South Asia at all, So it really should be South Asia, and then you really should put China on its own. So the lump of them all together, 7.5%. This is the electorate. Black British, 3.5%. No way is that. I don't think. And then you've got mixed, 2.5%, and other, 1%. So I think that's a way out though. But so there's maybe around about 41 million white voters. Really, they should separate that into native British and other white, really. Asian British, 3.6 million. This is voters, so yeah, and then it's just telling you more. Of course, you've got to turn out as well and vote. So white British usually around about a 78% turnout. In 2024, white British were a 78% turnout. Well, only 59% voted, so that's telling you 59% voted, and of that, 78% of white British voted. So that's telling you that grouping must be way lower than what they were saying up there, because they turned out in high numbers for the election. I mean, if it was 1948, that would have mean that the turnout would have been 78%, but the turnout was 59%. Yeah. So it was low. British Pakistanis were 64%, Black Caribbeans were 68%, but British Indians and Bangladeshis often have turnout rates nearly identical to white voters at around about 78%. The ethnic minority electorate is the fastest growing segment of the UK voting population. It has nearly doubled since 2010, when it was around 8%. Yeah, you've got all that. I mean, to give you an idea, this is the UK ethnicity breakdown for up to age 18. It's estimated for 2026. Well, that's better than the 2021 census because we've had the Boris wave since then. So native British is maybe about 65%. Asian British are 11.8%. Mixed, 9.8%. White other, so that, French or Romanian even, or Polish, 6.2%. Black British, 5.4%. Other ethnic groups, 1.7%. So, yeah, so the context. So, apparently, the estimate for native Brits at the moment is around about 75% for the UK. So, when you think about it, 25% of votes, we don't know if they're voting just typically the way native Brits vote, or if they're voting in ways not to do with, your individual thought process, or everyone was meant to come and vote Labour or Tory, really. That was the way it was meant to be. I would imagine Labour and Tory thought that. So, Asian British, driven by higher birth rates in Pakistani and Bangladeshi groups. Mixed groups, the fastest growing group. Nearly 1 in 10 children are mixed. And the interesting thing about this is that guy, Professor David Coleman, said that this group will become the biggest group in Britain by around about 2060. And that he said that in 2011, and we've had Boris waves and multiple waves since then. So whether you think it's going to happen, he actually said to put a year on it. He'll just say 2066, but I would guess it's probably going to be a lot sooner than that. But he thinks that mixed are going to be the biggest group, and I suppose it was going to be like a bit like Brazil, maybe, I don't know. But native Brits might become a sort of something that the Greens will regard, you know, same way they regard the native people of America and Australia, you know, that sort of thing. That's what we're voting for, basically. And then we've got white, that's the other European ones, include European, Roma and other white backgrounds, black British, concentrated heavily in urban centres like London and Birmingham. I don't think that's true anymore, actually. The border waves, it's everywhere sort of changed a lot. Other ethnic groups include Arab and other specific identities. I would expect that group to increase greatly. And we don't know what vision these people had of Britain, or why they came, why they left their homelands, what countries they ruled in and out. Did they rule countries out? You know, and for what reason? Did they rule continents out? If so, for what reason? And we don't know what image they had of Britain. Because personally, I think Britain's going to be a big multicultural country, vast multicultural, from certain regions around the world mainly. Yeah, and Labour at the moment are saying that's what we want, and Labour and the Greens, they're saying that's what we want. But I don't know if in practice they're actually thinking that that's going to happen, you know. I think they're maybe thinking of Britain in the 1950s or something, with to be nice to a small percent. Got to be, we don't know why they came, but they've got to be nice. You know, we've got to think of that, and we don't know if the people coming, if they're coming for multiculturalism, especially of the type the West is going to have, or if they're thinking geoculturalism, you know, and we don't know if in their homelands if they would vote far right on immigration for their homeland, because I think some of them are getting the right to vote now, even if they're 2 or 3 generations British, you know, like Pakistan. If you've got a grandparent, apparently, maybe they feel if the person's got a grandparent, probably maybe they're not going to be in the mixed thing. That's maybe what Pakistan are thinking. We don't know. I mean, we've got to presume that Labour and the Greens and that think Britain and the West, multiculturalism is going to be great, and probably Pakistan and all the countries they're coming from, Somalia, Afghanistan, they want multiculturalism as well, of the same type, long distance multiculturalism. These countries all want that as well, and the people, their diaspora in the West. So Yougov doesn't break down their weekly voting intention poll by ethnicity, but Gemini suggested go by London because it's the most diverse city. So this is London 2022, last week I think, and this week. So the Greens have went from 6% in 2022 in London to last week they went to 23%, and now they're at 28%. Labour have went from 42 in 2022. Last week they were 28 and now they're 25. So the Greens have taken over in London. And then you've got Lib Dems. They were 15. Now they're 7. Then they were 17 last week. Now they're 18. And the Tories have went from 28 in 2022 to 15 last week and still 15. And Reform have went from 3% to 14% last week, and now they're down to 12. It may be last month actually, but whatever, you know, it was very recent. So that's the way London's going. It looks like it's going to go green, and apparently Keir Starmer would lose his seat if these sort of things played out. But also we've got jokers in the pack, you know, we've got your party, we've got Restore Britain. I'm wondering if that's why Reform's vote is going down. Maybe these people are waiting for Restore Britain to be added to these things, because Restore Britain sometimes they commission polls by Find Out Now, which I recommend people do, you know. Any bloggers that are doing well financially, a Find Out Now poll can maybe only cost maybe £500, according to Gemini, for one question, that is, right enough, or whatever. But you can't beat polls, you know, because there was a poll I saw where the Israel-Palestine thing, it was looking at who do you have sympathy for. For Israel it was like 12%, and for Palestine it was 39%. But you wouldn't think that, by the way, Labour, Tory and Reform politicians speak. You know, you'd think like 90% were in favour of Israel, you know, on the subject. That, you know, so if somebody stuck that poll up, it would make it really hard. Every time Reform, Tories and Labour talk about it, you know, it would make things awkward for them. I mean, Reform have just announced that they've got a Friends of Israel group associated with them, which the Tories, I think it was the Tories that first had that, and then Labour have got one. So those three parties have got, I don't know about Lib Dems, but anyway, yeah, is that a sign of an establishment thing, you know? When you're voting Reform, I would guess you're voting for Israel as well, in terms of you want Israel to be able to do what it does or whatever. Yeah, and Reform are saying we're different, you know. Well, I think they are. I don't actually know. But this is also why I don't believe in parties, you know, party hampers. So that's what Reform have done. And they've also taken on some Tories, quite a lot of Tories. Since they've done that, their voting's been drifting, you know, drifting down. They're at 23% with Yougov at the moment, which is the lowest they've been since last April, apparently, when they were on the rise. So, yeah, like Yougov, I think their highest was 29% or around about, but with other pollsters, they were 35% maximum, around about, I don't know, November or something, October. So, yeah, they're coming right down. From Nigel's point of view, they're not like the Tories and Labour. They're not like the Tories at all. Yeah, but it'll be interesting. Restore Britain saying they've not got a view really on Israel as far as I've made it. They've said that they want to stay out of the Iran thing, and they want to ban halal and kosher meat killing, slaughter. Yeah. So, yeah, I was just looking to show you, like, so Yougov will get sympathy. This is, I don't know when it was, but Palestinian side, say 38% are sympathetic of the Brits. Israeli side 12 to 15. I think it depends. Maybe they're 6 months apart, these polls. Both sides equally 17. Neither don't know 31. So I'm guessing what Reform would look at. They would look at the Israeli side 15 plus don't knows and Reform and both sides, and they'd be saying that's why you have to view us as a side. We're very pro Netanyahu, etc. So that would be 31, 48, 58, 63%. They could maybe say, you know, if they wanted to look at it that way. And then more in common, do a poll of this as well. Palestinian side, roughly about 29%. Israeli side, 15. Neither side, 17. Both sides, 18. So it's roughly the same, really. But I think if people were commissioning a poll each week on this, you know, someone like anyone on the left, if they commissioned a poll from Find Out Now on this, the sympathy tracker for the Israel-Palestine conflict, it really makes it visually difficult for the likes of Reform and the Tories, who should be associated with being very, very, they want to let Israelis do what they feel they have to do or whatever, you know, that sort of thing. So, because here this poll saying Palestinian side, British sympathies 37%. So that's not just say an ethnic minority or anything, you know, but, and then sympathy for the Israel side is 15. So that's people who are supportive of Israel, 15% of Brits. So really, all the bloggers and YouTubers and that, if they're making a lot of money, I think they should commission polls each week, you know. Restore Britain are the only ones that are doing it at the moment, really. And they're coming out with fantastic things. that make it difficult for people to debate, you know, because usually what we get is that Labour and Greens, they can say the public have had enough, we're speaking on behalf of the public, because they always say they're speaking on behalf of their constituents, which really annoys me when they say that, you know. But then if you put polls up, it drives a coach and horses through our first past the post democratic system, really, you know, or it can if it's way out of sync with what they're saying. Anyway, I'm totally lost with what I'm saying, so back to the poll. Like, Reform are their lowest since April last year. They're definitely on the decline. I don't know why it is. Is it because they've brought loads of Tories in? Because it is pretty depressing to see the Tories actually, you know, when they talk. Even Robert Jenkins and Suella Braverman, when they were in the Tory party, I respected them because they were pissing outside the tent, really. But they took too long to move. You know, Lee Anderson made the move, and it was respect. First he went to the Tories, then he went to Reform, and he was ahead of the curve, whereas Suella and Robert Jenkins are far too late. You know, the whole thing shifted far away from what even with there. You know, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were grateful for somebody to sort of speak out in an implication type of way about immigration or mass immigration. Whereas even the Prime Minister said we're an island of strangers. I mean, when Keir Starmer said that, he outflanked Reform, basically. Because it was only a year and a half ago where Nigel Farage was saying things were impossible. He was saying we will lose, etc. So, and now we've got them not letting former churches be converted to mosques, which I don't understand, you know, because some of them are converted into discos and stuff. They can be converted into anything. To me, I don't want the situation to occur where anybody wants it. It become a mosque. That's what I want. But, you know, if you're having to do that, then you're having to go against the Brits. And then eventually, if their grouping becomes bigger, they're going to democratically get it anyway. So it doesn't matter what you say, you know, if you're saying that. So, and then with the Greens rise, well, I'm happy about that because, like I say, I follow things like the patriotic millionaires. And Elon Musk says that we're all going to be soon not have to work because automation, AI and robotics are going to do most of it. We'll only have to pay for the raw materials and we're all going to live in high, you know, universal high income. And really money won't matter anymore because all the robots and AI are going to do everything for us. So that's not actually socialist, but it's the same sort of outcome. Personally, it's better, actually, in my opinion. That means we can all do charity work and things like that if you want. Yeah, so the Greens, I would like to see a balance between the Greens and Reform. Personally, as I say, I look to the patriotic millionaires. I look to Dale Vince on energy policy. I look to Richard Murphy on tax stuff. I would call tax the infrastructure and social cohesion funds. So I'm a balance between the two of them. Neither of the parties would accept me. I mean, I'm not Reform either, as I say. I would be restore Britain, but I've had no choice. Out of this thing, I'd vote Reform. Tories, I don't even pay attention to anymore. Labour, I don't either. I listen. Well, I don't listen. I read about Keir sometimes to see because he's the Prime Minister, basically. I don't know how Labour aren't getting rid of him. I just don't understand it. You know, have they not seen how football managers have done? I respect the way the Tories deal with it really a lot more. The Lib Dems, yeah, and they don't matter now either, really. So for these polls, we're waiting for Restore Britain and Your Party to be added. So just to cover my bases, here's some of these quotes that I made. So this is Kemi Badenoch about identity, her own identity. And this is from December 24 and a podcast in August 25 on Yoruba versus Nigerian identity. I find it interesting that everybody defines me as being Nigerian. I identify less with the country than with the specific ethnicity, Yoruba. That's what I really am. So can we do that in Britain as well? Are Brits allowed to do that? On distancing from northern Nigeria, I have nothing in common with the people from the north of the country, the Boko Haram, where Islamism is. Those were our ethnic enemies, and yet you end up being lumped in with those people. On British identity, I'm Nigerian through ancestry by birth, but by identity I'm not really. I have not renewed my Nigerian passport, I think not since the early 2000s. Home is where my now family is. So what she says about Nigeria, she argues that Nigeria is a colonial construct that lumps together distinct ethnic groups with historical animosities. She identifies primarily with her Yoruba roots rather than the Nigerian state. Well, I agree with her there, and why don't they just break up in the way they should by ethnic tribe, as she seems to be saying? And can we do that in Britain as well? Or, I'm guessing we can't. Integration and loyalty. She frequently uses her personal history to argue for British integration, etc. And don't forget she's an anchor baby, or I don't think her parents had any connection to Britain. They came here when the mum was very pregnant, had her in London, and at that time, if you were born in the soil, you were a citizen of Britain. And Mrs Thatcher changed that policy around about 1983, I think. Kemi was born in 1980. And here she is now, the Tory leader, the leader of the Tory party. And here's a reaction to that. In Nigeria, many officials and citizens criticised her for disowning her roots and using ethnic enemy rhetoric, which some argued was divisive and historically inaccurate regarding modern Yoruba-Northern relations. And in the UK, supporters viewed her stance as a refreshing rejection of identity politics. Well, I don't know about that. I don't know. Yeah, and here's things she said about multiculturalism. So this is Kemi Badenoch saying this. She's built a reputation for making blunt statements on multiculturalism that frequently clash with progressive viewpoints. Her arguments often centre on the idea that British values are superior to certain foreign customs and that the UK should be more selective about the culture of the people it admits. And this is someone from Nigeria who doesn't identify as Nigeria and identifies as ethnically. On the validity of cultures, she made a remark in 2024, we cannot be naive and assume immigrants will automatically abandon ancestral ethnic hostilities at the border, or that all cultures are equally valid. They are not. And then she also said, I am not talking about cuisine, I am talking about customs. I think that cultures where women are told that they should not work, or where somebody at the door says, I can't speak to you, I will get my husband, I don't think that is as equally valid as our culture. And in nearly 25, she doubled down on the idea that immigration must be tied to cultural alignment. The hotel analogy, our country is our home, it is not a hotel. I mean, perhaps some people come and see the West as Disneylands, and maybe they're thinking, well, the main one's Disneyland America, but Disneyland Britain's okay. There's Disneyland Ireland, Disneyland Australia. We don't know if people are thinking that way, and we don't know if these people have ruled out continents, etc. And if so, for what reason? Or if they're coming for multiculturalism or duoculturalism or to integrate totally or whatever, we don't know. And so what else? Our country is our home. It's not a hotel. If people arriving don't want to integrate into British culture, they shouldn't be here. And what's British culture, Because it's evolving all the time, depending on the people. Our cultural coherence. She suggested that some legal residents might need to leave to ensure a mostly, but not entirely culturally coherent group of people, arguing that the UK should prioritise those who love this country and will maintain and uphold its traditions, not change them. On race in the UK, she rejects the narrative of systemic racism in Britain, which often puts her at odds with activists. Yeah, and I also agree with her. She says Britain's not broken, which I totally agree with. I mean, it could be very close now. And personally, I'm thinking what Professor David Betts says. I'm not talking slightly or whatever, it could. The whole West could. Because we see the countries people are coming from, and now we've got the whole mix. Yeah, in some countries there's a caste system, in other countries there's female genital mutilation. In the West, possibly these two things, two different traditions are present rather than just one, For example, that's just one example. The best place to be black. I tell my children this is the best country in the world to be black because it's a country that sees people, not labels. On critical race theory, she has called critical race theory a divisive agenda and stated, "We believe, as Martin Luther King once said, people should be judged by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin." And if that puts us in conflict with those who would racialise society, bring it on. On colonialism, in a leaked message in 2021, her views on the British Empire shocked many on the left. "I don't care about colonialism. There was never any concept of rights in Africa, so the people who lost out were old elites, not everyday people. Colonisers just made it a different bunch of winners and losers." Yeah, that sort of thing. But anyway, my point is, say over the last 30 years, should you not be questioned by the police under their woke ideology they've been working under? And then on top of that, you had Keir Starmer's Stasi laws that came in where you get a 24-hour court. You get arrested on Tuesday, you're up in court on the Thursday, and you're expected to plead guilty, and you get jailed like Lucy Conley, Should you not be questioning that sort of thing? I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying under the woke policy plus Keir's Stasi laws. And then as reference point, I'm using Keir's Island of Strangers speech from last year, May 25. So it was a significant speech on immigration and integration. Critics specifically accused him of triangulating to the right and using language reminiscent of Enoch Powell's infamous 68 Rivers of Blood speech. The following lines were singled out by left-wing MPs such as Zara Sultana and Nadia Whittome, and activist groups as shameful and dangerous. The Island of Strangers line. So here's a quote: "In a diverse nation like ours, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together." Why it shocked the left. Critics argued this mirrored Powell's claims that British people were finding themselves made strangers in their own country. They saw it as framing immigrants as an inherent threat to social cohesion. And then the one nation experiment remark he made: "Britain has become a one nation experiment in open borders, a squalid chapter for our politics, our economy and our country." Why it shocked the left. Using the word experiment suggested that multiculturalism and high migration levels were a failed social test rather than a positive evolution of British society. On incalculable damage, the damage of uncontrolled migration has been incalculable. Public services and housing access has been placed under too much pressure. Our economy has been distorted by perverse incentives to import workers. And then on cultural coherence, he said, "When you have an immigration system sold by politicians on an entirely false premise, then you're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart." I mean, when he made this speech, I think it was the strongest speech on this since Enoch Powell, and Nigel Farage looked like a far left on immigration in terms of his own policies at the time. But personally, I think because of the wokeness over the last 25 years, he should have handed himself into the police station after the speech for questioning. And then because of his own Stasi woke laws, he should have been up in court 2 days later, told to plead guilty, and that we wouldn't see him for 18 months or something, That's the way I'm thinking. I've just noticed that, wait a minute. I've just noticed that Kemi Badenoch's making a speech today about identity, apparently. Identity politics. The Tories will end identity politics in the state Full stop. Maybe make a video about it later. And then for reference, here's Hamza Yusuf's post about the burqa to bikini. Here is an idea, regardless of whether it is a bikini or a burqa. How about politicians don't tell women what to wear? And by that he means British women, I guess, and he was the SNP leader and Scottish leader for a few months, just about 2 years ago or something. So, and that's, I would say the Greens align with that as well. That's how they see British women expressing themselves, the spectrum, etc. And then for reference, I'm using Gemini here to find a percent of women who have FGM by country and ethnicity. I've seen different ones from this. I mean, it's Somalia, that's in Kenya in 2022. The Somalians of Kenya are it's like 87%, other tribes 77%. So I'll go through these. So Sarah, the Gambia, that tribe's got it quite big in there. Somali 95%, and Ethiopia greater than, actually. There's 98% in Guinea of that tribe. This is who. And keep in mind that Kemi Badenoch says she identifies as Yoruba rather than Nigerian, you know. So Sierra Leone is greater than 90%. Yeah. And here's Gemini's answer by country. So Somalia, they say 99% of women of a certain age, 15 to 49. Apparently there's a, quote, cutting season. I don't know, but Guinea 94%, Mali 88%, Sierra Leone 83%, Egypt maybe between 70 to 87%, Sudan 86%, Eritrea 83%, Burkina Faso 75%, the Gambia 72%. I couldn't think of a way to find out how many of these countries have become British citizens or whatever, but so estimated population in the UK, and this is from a 24 to 25 estimate of population survey. Somalia, it's maybe 120,000. Estimated percent that the UK government makes citizens, 75% plus. Migration trends stable, slight increase. Apparently because of the health and care and skilled worker visa under Boris Johnson, a lot have come in from these countries. So Nigeria would maybe get 300,000. This is an estimate from back then. Egypt 55,000, Sudan 45, Eritrea 40, Sierra Leone 30, etc., etc. Kenya 165,000. So, and citizenship is very high from Kenya, 85%. The UK government make citizens. And here's how it's saying these groups came about. The health and care surge between 23 and 25, and Shabana Mahmood closed it all down. It was Boris Johnson that brought it in. The UK saw a massive increase in migration from Nigeria and Kenya, specifically for the NHS and care sector. This has brought in a younger working age demographic. Asylum patterns, migration from Sudan and Eritrea is currently dominated by humanitarian routes. The hidden second generation. Official country of birth stats don't include the children of these migrants who are born in the UK. Research suggests there are over 60,000 girls born in England and Wales to mothers from FGM practicing countries. And citizenship lag. There is typically a 5 to 10 year lag between arrival and citizenship. Groups like Somalis and Sierra Leoneans who arrived in larger numbers in the 90s and 2000s now have a very high rate of UK nationality. So, impact on UK healthcare. The NHS identifies roughly 6,000 to 7,000 new cases of FGM annually. Most of these are not new injuries, but rather women who underwent the practice as children abroad and are now accessing UK maternity services or GP care for the first time. But my main point about this is I can't see the Greens and Labour supporting this, you know. Possibly female Greens and Labour politicians didn't used to support the burqa, but they do now. I mean, when I say that, I'm talking about maybe 50 years ago or something. But they do now. But I can't see them changing on this. But have these communities abandoned it, you know? So whoever created the simple citizenship test, which is like a pub quiz, basically, where you have to tick the right boxes, basically. So the UK citizenship test asks questions about FGM in the Life in the UK test. And apparently they get a handbook, a guide for new residents, includes a section on the law and, quote, fundamental principles. But who's set them? And as the people change, are these going to change as well? You know, Zia Yusuf's just said that reform won't let former churches be changed into mosques. In the old days, nobody wanted to change them into mosques, but it feels like now they do, and it feels like more and more that will happen. And maybe someday the people who want to convert old churches into mosques will vote an MP in on that issue, or might even be able to be part of a government or whatever, you know. So that doesn't mean anything at all, you know what I mean. So anyway, on this, you may be asked multiple choice questions regarding the legal status of FGM in the UK. The test expects you to know that FGM is illegal and is considered a form of child abuse. Sample question style, a question might ask, is it legal to take a girl abroad for the purpose of FGM? And then it says the answer is no. Well, currently, anyway. So, and the good character requirement, well, there isn't a specific question about this. Any conviction related to it would lead to a mandatory refusal of citizenship. I wonder if that actually ever happens. And non-conviction harming, the Home Office can refuse an application if there is reliable evidence that a person has been involved. This includes involvement in that. But it seems at the moment, anyone who becomes a UK citizen is regarded to abhor this, and it's never going to be a British value, apparently, by the people who currently set the British value test. And then you've got the citizenship oath. You must swear or affirm an oath of allegiance and pledge. I will give my loyalty to the United Kingdom and respect its rights and freedoms. I will uphold its democratic values. I will observe its laws faithfully. So, really, you must know it is illegal and a criminal offence. And that's been set by whoever set the British values. I'm guessing at no point will female politicians with British family that goes back past 1947 will ever accept that. Oh, but you can't tell, you know. But yeah, that's it. And that's really everything. Okay, bye bye.